So today I'm going to show you my holiday biscotti. It has cranberries and pistachios, which gives it fun red and green flecks. And it has anise seeds, which is one of my favorite flavorings because it's very European. I love that little bit of licorice hint. And I just put the whole seed in. So I'm going to show you how that all comes together. And I'm also using some unique ingredients that you may not be familiar with. The first one is coconut sugar. This is what coconut sugar looks like. It's just like granulated sugar, but it's unprocessed and it's very low glycemic, which means when it hits your bloodstream, you're not gonna get that, jacked up feeling like you do with a lot of sugar. And the other ingredient that I'm using is called palm shortening. So it's gonna be similar to a Crisco, but not the hydrogenated fat. It's a palm fruit, and it's actually considered red, but it has this yellow color. That's natural. It's not dyed. It doesn't have any artificial colors. But this is a good substitute for butter because we're not doing any dairy. And I find in some recipes, this type of a product works better than trying to use ghee, which is clarified butter and doesn't have those fat solids because they've been removed. So a couple of tips to start off. I already have over here in my KitchenAid some of the coconut sugar and palm shortening in the bowl. I'll show you what that looks like. That's what that looks like right now. It's been creaming together. I like to use the creaming method, but you can see it's still kind of granular. If you don't have a KitchenAid mixer, you can use a hand mixer with a bowl. You can even do this by hand with a spatula or a wooden spoon. I just like to do the mixer because I'm so used to it. Just scraping down the bowl. It's important that you scrape down the bowl in between each addition. I'm gonna add some maple syrup, okay? So this is a 1/4 cup of maple syrup going in. Go ahead and incorporate that in. Hopefully you can hear me over the mixer. And then I'm gonna add 3 eggs, which I already have broken here, with a little bit of vanilla, about a teaspoon of vanilla. And I've already blended the dry ingredients together. So you can see here I have, and I'm just gonna use my whisk to blend these together while that's mixing. I have 2½ cups of almond flour, 1½ cups of tapioca flour, 1/4 cup of coconut flour. Now those are actually all available at your local grocery store. I was actually at my local grocery store yesterday at my Publix, and they carry all of these ingredients. A year ago, you couldn't find them. And then it has a teaspoon of salt and 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Now, baking powder contains a grain. It's typically made with cornstarch. So what I do is, baking powder is basically baking soda and cornstarch. That's all it is. So I mix my own baking powder with baking soda and cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is a very easy thing to find. It's in the spice section of the grocery store or the baking section. You can also find it on Amazon. I buy a giant 1-pound container. And then I can mix my own baking powder without having to worry about having the grain, since corn is a grain. Also, be careful when you're buying certain ingredients, like things that you wouldn't expect to have additives. These are organic cranberries. Of course, they're sweetened with sugar because you couldn't eat a cranberry without it being sweetened. But I did see some cranberries by certain larger brand companies that had corn fiber and some other ingredients that I don't really understand why they're there. So you think you're just buying cranberries, definitely check the labels because we're trying to keep this as unprocessed as possible. So now I'm gonna add the eggs one at a time. And I add them one at a time because if you add them too fast, that much liquid going into the very dense isn't gonna blend well. So I've just got them here and I just kind of pour them in one at a time. There goes one. I'm gonna let that blend in. When you bake with gluten, there's something called a short dough, which is something where the gluten has not been developed. That's like a cookie or a shortbread or a quick bread like a pound cake or any other kind of cake. The crumb is going to have a very fine texture. Then the more you develop the gluten, you develop that elastic and it gets stretchy, and that's how you get bread. So I'm sure you're kind of aware of those basic principles when it comes to gluten baking. Gluten-free baking, it's not the same at all. These have to absorb the liquid to mimic that type of texture. And then we'll use things that also help with that elastic type texture when we're doing bread. Something like psyllium husk really helps. And one day when we do bread together, I'll show you how that works. That's blending in really well, so I'm just gonna go ahead and add the third one right in. So that's the vanilla with the 3 eggs. And then I'm gonna add the dry. I will scrape it down one more time. You'll see this comes together really quick. Scrape this down one more time, and it's very liquidy now. I'll show you how that looks, since the bowl did me a favor and came off anyway. So that's how it looks. It's very wet. Sorry, it's a little dark. And now we'll start adding the dry. I like to do half and then the other half, just to give it a chance to blend in. And that's coming together. And now we'll just go ahead and add the rest. And before it gets completely mixed in, I'm gonna throw in these inclusions. This is half a cup of pistachios and a quarter cup of cranberries. Is that right? I like to make sure that all those dry ingredients get absorbed, as I was describing earlier. I just have a little tapioca flour here. I'm gonna dust this board just a little bit. I'm gonna put peel off the plastic wrap and put the dough right on there. And then I'm gonna shape it into a loaf shape. I don't like to use a lot of flour because I don't want them to look dusty when I bake them. So you can see this dough has a really nice texture. It's a little sticky, but it's not super sticky. I can handle it with my fingers slightly dusted. And now I'm going to show you how I pan it up. Sheet pans are essential in a baking kitchen. Of course, I do a lot of cooking on them as well, but these really are, this is a quarter sheet. This is brand new. This is what they look like after you've used them for 20 years. They still work. And this is a half sheet, okay? And I've got parchment paper here. I like the unbleached parchment paper. A full sheet would be 2 of these put together. That's not gonna fit in a residential or home oven, but that's what we used all the time in a commercial oven. But I love my half sheets. And I love my quarter sheets. So what I'm gonna do is pan this up on a quarter sheet, lift this up because I want to get that extra dough off of the cutting board and put it right onto the sheet pan. And I'm just going to spread this out the rest of the way. You can see how that looks. It's a little thick because these will rise because of the baking powder. So I'm going to spread this out almost to the length of the pan, just pressing gently, because you don't want too many finger marks. They will bake out, but you want to make sure that you have them nice and smooth for the most part, and squared off. It will rise a little bit in the middle. It's going to look like a loaf. And about a 1/2 to 3/4 inch thick. And this will go in a preheated oven for 25 minutes, 350 degrees. I've already baked off some, and I've already cut some of it. I let them cool, but not completely. This is still a little warm to the touch. And then I use my serrated knife, and first I take the end off. Let me turn it around and show you on this side. And I like to do it at a little bit of an angle. And the reason for that is it gives you more surface area. Just like when I cut carrots or parsnips or any of my root vegetables, and I always kind of cut them on an angle. Anything like that you cut on a bias, you're gonna get more surface area, and that really helps dry these out when they go in for the second bake. So now I'm just gonna go about the width of the narrow part of my knife. I'm using a serrated knife which is like a bread knife. It's got the ridges. And because of the inclusions, the nuts and the cranberries, you want to do a sawing motion so you go through everything. If you just try and push, you're going to crack the cookie in half. And that happens anyway, but I'll show you my best trick. So I'm going about the same width as the front blade of the knife, and I can just lay it down like that and put my finger and then start to saw. And make sure you go all the way through. And the same thing all the way across. So again, like I said, I baked these for 25 minutes. I let them cool slightly, about maybe 20 minutes they cooled. But this process has to happen all at the same time. It's okay to make the dough in advance and refrigerate it, but then once you start baking, you have to keep the baking process going. You can't let this cool completely and then go back to it. And yes, it does develop a little bit of cracking on the top, but if you're careful with how you cut, you can go right through it. And then run them. So I'm just gonna put that right back on to the sheet pan, and now I'm going to flip them so they lay flat, because these are going back in the oven for 10 minutes, and then we turn them all over and bake them again for an additional 10 minutes. And if a cranberry or one of the nuts falls out, just put it right back in. But look how cute these are with their red and green specks. Aren't they fun? So I'm gonna put these in the oven, and then I'll show you what they look like finished. And there is the finished biscotti. So I baked these for 10 minutes. Then I just, when the timer went off, opened the oven, and I just did one of these. You can do it right on the sheet pan with the oven door open. You just flip them like that. Flip, 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 all the way down the row. And if you're doing a big batch of them, you can do them on a half sheet pan. Just leave a little bit of space at the end of each row, so when you roll them, they flip the other way. And then they go back in for another 10 minutes. You get this beautiful, crispy, hard, still hot biscotti that is perfect for dipping in your latte. So that's it for today. That's how I make biscotti. It's so simple. I hope you try it. If you do try it, post a picture of it on Instagram or Facebook and tag me so I can see your results, because I love to see how things work out. And if they don't work out, let me know that too, because I can help you. I'm good at troubleshooting. So thanks for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun. I'm going to be back next week with more baking recipes. And thanks for joining me, and have a wonderful day.